empowerment of youth and women through job creation and capacity building. She's currently the CEO of Sampa Africa, and prior to Sampa, she founded Sarafina, an e-commerce platform sourcing ethical fashion brands from Africa and Asia. She holds an MBA from MIT with a focus on enterprise management, and she was a finalist in the MIT 100K competition, pitching in the emerging markets category. She was the student coordinator for the MIT Demeter Entrepreneur Support Network, and is also a recipient of the Legatum and MasterCard Foundation fellowships. Ladies and gentlemen, let's please welcome Ms. Vita Diamande to the stage.
Good morning. I always say it's so much better when people introduce you than you introduce yourself, so thank you so much for everything you said. It's been an incredible couple of days, hasn't it? Yeah. And before I start, I would like us all to give a big round of applause to Emmanuel and the organizing team of African Investor Week, because it's been The breadth of topics presented have provided us all with incredible insights, from entrepreneurship, education, to finding homegrown solutions when it comes to raising capital and building SMEs. It's been a privilege to meet all of the Mandela, Washington entrepreneurs. You guys are doing a great job. I've been in your shoes before, at the booths, pitching your stories, and all I want to say is best of luck with everything. I thank you for inviting me and for giving me this opportunity to speak. I also would like to thank the Legatum Center for Entrepreneurship at MIT for making it possible for me to travel and be here today. Now, if you have any questions about MIT, the Legatum Center, which supports entrepreneurs from developing countries, or the MIT GLAB program, which provides student supports to SMEs in developing countries, please speak with myself or with Emmanuel. So my name is Vita. I'm an entrepreneur and SME consultant. I was 24 when I launched my first venture, and I've since gone on to launch 2 other ventures. I regularly also consult with SMEs in Nigeria and in Cote d'Ivoire to help them launch and structure their businesses. I went to MIT for an MBA, splitting my time between the Legatum Center and the Enterprise Management Program. I wanted to not only launch startups, but also learn how to build them into full-fledged businesses. I moved back to West Africa in 2017, and a common question I get is, why did I move back and why now? There are a myriad of reasons, but the ultimate ones were that I saw opportunities. I knew I could create more value by being in Cote d'Ivoire, and more importantly, I wanted to be part of building the economic foundation that will provide jobs and opportunities for our people to thrive at home. The stability following the end of the political crisis in 2011 in Cote d'Ivoire has resulted in exceptionally high economic growth, averaging 9% between 2012 and 2016. And we remain in the top 15 fastest growing economies in the world. Infrastructure developments are booming, private consumption is on the rise, and so is foreign direct investments in everything from infrastructure, real estate, agriculture, and manufacturing. We are regaining our status as a prosperous West African country. The truth is, it would have been a real shame for me to have missed the second wind of the country that was my first home. I grew up watching my entrepreneurial parents launch companies in Cote d'Ivoire. Now that I've moved back, there isn't a day that I don't pass either advertisement for products that they've launched or offices they built. My father also created the government's flagship agency, AGEFOP, to support SMEs, and he trained many of the leaders we now see in government and in the private sector. My father did not live to see me start in entrepreneurship, or follow his footsteps into building the private sector in our country. I feel not only a sense of responsibility, but a duty to carry the torch and take his legacy further. Today, I would like to speak with you about changing the narrative and setting a new vision for Africa. My vision for the continent is one of prosperity, stability, and equal opportunity for all of its citizens. It is one of inclusive growth through entrepreneurship and the development of a robust private sector, one in which we engage with the rest of the world in cooperation and mutually beneficial exchange, as opposed to resource extraction and wealth transfer. With that said, I ask you to humor me for a moment on the epiphany I had while watching Black Panther. For those of you who might be hiding in a hole and have missed it, Black Panther was a superhero film released in 2018 about the fictitious kingdom of Wakanda, a technologically advanced nation in Africa that isolates itself from the world by posing as a third world country. Their secret weapon, vibranium, a heart-shaped herb that gives its people superhuman abilities. The film was a far cry from the narrative we are used to seeing in the media about corruption, political instability, poverty, and low productivity in Africa. While we are not the only continent to face these challenges, we seem to be one of the few where negative stories seem to be the only narrative that is of interest. Fortunately for us, people have been pushing back against this single narrative with their stories and visions of the Africa that we know and want. The timely release of Black Panther seemed to have hit a nerve worldwide, boxing $1.3 billion and becoming the 9th grossing film of all time. I came out of this film excited and full of so much hope. After a while, it dawned on me that this vision of a strong Africa that we all want, one of economic, political, and social stability, is possible. And while I have yet to discover Wakanda, I realize now that we are responsible for building it. Each and every one of us in this room is a key stakeholder that will contribute to Africa's growth story. Whether we are entrepreneurs, investors, educators, government officials, or members of civil society. In order to do so, we need to unite behind a positive vision of the continent, one that will allow us to finally unearth its true potential, which has yet to be tapped into. We are on the cusp of an evolution in the development of the continent, but before we get to where we are presently, it's always good to remember where we came from. In more recent history of our civilization, we had the great African empires of Kush, Aksum, Songhai, Ashanti, Manding, and of course the great Zulu Empire, just to name a few. These empires had their own political, economic, and cultural systems. During the heights of their time, they were all great commercial centers, trading outside the continent. I am the proud descendant of the Manding Empire, otherwise known as the Mali Empire, one of the richest of all time. To this date, Mansa Musa, a ruler in the 14th century of the Manding Empire, is the richest man to have ever lived. Over time, our continent transitioned from richness and self-sufficiency to occupation and extraction of wealth, a model that we all know was perpetuated all over colonial Africa. Our people have been thrown from one system to another, disintegrating societies with abrupt changes disrupting how we learn, from oral to written, to changes in language skills required to access certain jobs and hence economic opportunities, and finally to how we make a living, from organized passage of youth to certain livelihoods to the only the strong and privileged mentality that we now have adopted. I state these facts because I believe we underappreciate the effect that this destruction of indigenous systems has had on our people and our ability to thrive. I have witnessed these differences in my own family, between those who were chosen to adopt the French system of education versus those who were raised in more traditional environments. It seems families were hedging their bets to see which systems would win out. We now know the answer to that question, but keep in mind that this shift happened just 2 generations ago. We are constantly straddling 2 worlds, one that has almost been lost, another that has been imposed, and very few of us have been able to balance our traditions with the Western system we now need to understand in order to succeed in this globalized world. We have reached a point in our history where we need to take the best of both worlds and make it work for us. The discussion we just listened to on the Islamic investment is a perfect example of reconciling tradition with modern application. We are the descendants of great kingdoms, and we live on a continent that has been feeding the rest of the world since colonial times. This continent has been shining so bright that people from all corners of the world have been flocking to take our resources from under us with the help of our leaders. It is time for us to have a united Pan-African vision to empower our people to be part of the wealth generated from this great continent. While the challenges are well documented for the private sector, the opportunities are many. As I speak, we are ushering in a new era of homegrown enterprises that will scale and build a locally controlled private sector. We have entrepreneurs who have been at it for the past decades, building their companies despite the challenges they have faced. They are the faces that will usher our countries into economic prosperity. Now, finding these gems is never easy unless you are on the ground. Companies providing platforms to introduce investors to African businesses, such as our host Lente OTC and Uprise Markets, provide an invaluable service. I would like to now share with you today some of the gems that I have come across during my time in West Africa. From Promoprint in Nigeria, one of the top manufacturers of t-shirts in the country, addressing a population of 17.5 million people in Lagos alone. The founder, Patricia Ajora, has been running this manufacturing business for the last 5 years, in a country where electricity cuts are the norm. While some would have quit and packed up, Patricia has pushed through, turning her business into a success story and employing 54 staff full-time and 100 during busy periods. To Conergy's Group, a company providing integrated energy efficiency solutions, which recently entered into a joint partnership with the French energy company, EDF, to jointly develop and deploy solutions across West Africa. This is a company that had to be rebuilt from scratch following the civil war in Côte d'Ivoire. Talk about resilience. We have Cosmos in Abidjan, a shopping center recently built by a young Ivorian entrepreneur and investor in the Yopougon commune. It was the first shopping center built in a mid-level income area, tapping into the purchasing power of this oft-neglected middle class. Lastly, we have On Point Africa Group, a leading advisory and market research firm started by a former BCG principal in Côte d'Ivoire. On a continent where data is often scarce, the firm has established a team of 450 surveyors across West and Central Africa, collecting data on products, companies, and consumer habits across the regions. These are just a handful of the many local heroes that have stepped up to create value in their communities. For anyone that has spent significant time on the continent, it is apparent that the human capital in Africa is an untapped potential full of intelligence, resilience, and creativity. I have lived in different parts of Africa, Asia, and North America, and I stand by my statement that the people of this continent have a determination that seems superhuman given the circumstances they find themselves in. As we all know, Africa's young population is poised to become the largest young population in the world. We have a demographic dividend that can be harnessed by the expansion of entrepreneurship, investments into SMEs, and sound economic policy at the national and pan-African level. Our youth population explosion has been perceived as a risk if we do not manage to create enough jobs to employ the millions of youth entering the labor force every year. I used to be one of those people who worried. After spending more time on the continent, meeting people across East, West, and Southern Africa, I have joined the definite optimist camp. I believe the future is bright if we plan for one. Wakanda might have had vibranium, but we have something even stronger, and that is our spirit. Our people, no matter what dire situations they find themselves in, are always resilient and have a faith in the future that is unwavering. The truth is, our human capital is and has always been our best asset. So, how do we harness this potential? I believe our vision must be Pan-African. We may be 54 countries with thousands of languages and ethnicities. However, we are united by shared experience and a distinct identity of being African. It was once said to me that India could have been its own continent, with a population of over 1.3 billion people and 29 states, each with its own ethnic groups and languages. The strength of India has been in its unity, and as the founding fathers of post-colonial Africa predicted, it will also be ours. In addition to being Pan-African, our vision must also be inclusive of people of all socioeconomic levels, and we must do a better job of respecting people in the informal sector that may have more traditional backgrounds. In West Africa, the informal sector accounts for 50% of national output and over 80% of jobs. In Kenya, it's the country's main job creator. Now, one thing that unites us all as Africans, no matter what country you go to, is respecting your elders and your traditions. For some reason, we continue to show respect in all ways, except for when it comes to doing business. We must not assume that because someone has not had the same education as us, that they have nothing to offer, especially when they have had more experience than us. I have spoken with many women working in markets across Abidjan and Lagos, and I'm always impressed by their ability to turn a $20 investment into commerce that allows them to pay rent, put their children through school, and feed them, all the while making enough profit to take their activities to the next level. One of the best innovations I've learned from them is the concept of the tontine, which is a saving and investing mechanism where a group of women will put a certain amount of money in the saving pool each month and rotate which member gets to take the funding monthly to invest in their business. I know there must be hundreds of other learnings we could benefit from if only we had the humility to listen. Finally, I believe it's crucial for us to create our own models of ecosystems that work for us. There are 5 key ecosystem stakeholders that I would like to highlight today. The first are the entrepreneurs. You are the heroes of your communities. The journey is never easy, and it is not a straight path. As entrepreneurs, we are often told that we are being irresponsible by leaving the job market to find solutions to problems we see in our communities. The truth is, there is nothing more responsible one can do than to create value and job opportunities for the communities they operate in. My advice to the entrepreneurs in the room today is, keep your eyes on the prize. Surround yourself with those who believe in you, and learn to be your own barometer of success. Secondly, the financial institutions. We often underappreciate the role that African investors have played in raising money to invest in this continent. This has been done despite the negative image of doing business in Africa. I do believe, however, that it's important for the financing community to diversify and make available different types of capital at each stage of a company's evolution. Keeping in mind that providing too much at the beginning, unless the company requires heavy R&D, can hamper an entrepreneur's drive to find product market fit, making the company reliant on fundraising instead of building commercially viable businesses. Too little funding also at a certain stage can hamper the company's ability to scale. There is a balance to be found. Now, it was mentioned that SMEs lack the structure to receive certain financing. Now, I have to say, as an SME consulting, we find issues with getting financing to do our activities, actually, because SMEs cannot finance us as well. So I would love to open the discussion to investors to see whose role it is to pave to help us with the structuring so that we can get them ready for you to invest in them. Now, thirdly, governments. In order for the private sector to function, the government must do its part to ensure a basic level of political, economic, and social stability and minimize the risks in the environments that entrepreneurs operate in. My father used to say that entrepreneurs like risks, but they're only interested in the risks that they themselves can control. The days of political violence, poor governance, and lack of preferential procurement for local companies must be behind us if we are to thrive. Governments must also look at tax incentives and promotion and execution of intra-African trade. Fourth, educators. We must revisit our educational systems and learn from systems that empower children to learn in experiential learning environments, as is found in alternative schools such as the Montessori system. We must also educate our children on our traditional values and history if we are to start being proud of our heritage and stop looking outside for validation. For tertiary education, it is key to provide hands-on experiential learning opportunities as highlighted by Dr. Habib on Monday. We may be born entrepreneurs, but our passion can soon turn to disillusionment without knowing how to design, plan, and execute our businesses. Fifth, the hubs. It was mentioned by Kwena Mabocha that we currently have over 600 incubators/accelerators across the continent. The work that has been done to pull these hubs together has been nothing short of heroic. My ask would be that for the next phase of growth, that we be more inclusive of non-tech entrepreneurs. Our markets have diverse needs, and technology is not the solution for all. Without this, we neglect a good number of entrepreneurs in fields as diverse as real estate, logistics, agro-production, and manufacturing. Now, the sixth and final stakeholders are all of us in this room as customers, whether we be B2B or B2C customers. Do we put our money where our mouth is? If we do not support local businesses when selecting service providers or purchasing products, then how do we expect these businesses to grow? It is time we start building this continent from within. I hope you will join me in working towards this new vision of Africa. Thank you.
The line that stood out for me is when you said, we are united by a distinct identity of being African. And if you've